Peace, 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 peace. We are back for another episode, special episode of Purpose and Practice. I had a thought before I get into introducing our guests. You're here live with Purpose and Practice with your host, Dr. Rawls Dill. And like, I know school's starting, and this is like a real exciting time, for me as an educator and being in the game of education for 20 years. But then even just being, a child and being a student, like we know school's like everything for us. Cause like, growing up, you were always in school. And then I had the fortune of being an educator, being a teacher, teaching at the middle school level, teaching at the high school level, coaching, and then even becoming an administrator, which is my current role. So with this time of the year, it's like that countdown. And if you're a teacher, you start getting amped. Like, this is the time, like Felicia smiling, like this is the time that usually when I'll be watching like Lean on Me, like I'll be watching all those movies that kind of like get me amped to be like, back into the classroom and to be back in school. This year, it's a little different because, we have everything going on with COVID. We got this remote learning going on in a lot of situations in school districts. We got uncertainty in terms of, are we going to do the whole year remotely? Are we going to do a hybrid? It's just a lot, man. And there's stress out there, especially certain communities. There's a lot of communities that have even more stress, whether it's having the devices to be able to connect at home and having the opportunity to engage in distance learning. I think that has been well documented in terms of the digital divide and poor communities not having the things that they need to engage in digital learning. And then you got the health thing, you got teachers who were going on the front lines, and putting, their health and their safety and their family's health and safety possibly, at risk. And obviously our babies who are in the school, so it's a complicated time. So it's like an exciting time, but then it's also a stressful time. Teachers have been getting a lot of like, I don't want to say beat up, but they ain't been getting their due respect lately. A lot of folks is out there, just bad mouthing teachers, and I was like, you know what? At Purpose and Practice, we all about education. We're all about teachers. I was like, we got to put something out to start showcasing some talented educators, some educators that are doing their thing. So tonight, like we're kicking it off, and I don't know how long it's going to go. It may go a month, it may go longer than a month. And I was like, let's kick it off. And we're kicking it off first on the list, right? Is one of my favorites. Another one, like for many reasons. Someone, I was able to be her principal when she was in high school. She was ninth grade. I was her ninth grade academy principal. And I fell in love with her leadership, which I wasn't surprised about because she comes from a great family. In fact, a family that in terms of in Long Branch, it's legacy. You look at, I look at her mom, Roxanne, I look at Stan, and I'm like, yo, those were the old heads that kind of like brought us up from around the way. You know what I'm saying? Like they led us. And when their kids came through, it was like, I got to treat them just like, Stan and Roxanne and all those folks treated us coming up, Ray and, Big June, all of them. So Felicia goes, phenomenal athlete, phenomenal student, brilliant student, goes off to college in teaching, majors in education, comes back to Long Branch, which is another thing we're going to get into because like coming back to your hometown and teaching, I know what that was like for me. We're going to find out what it was like for Felicia. But I'm just excited. She went off to get her master's, like in education. Like she's just doing great things, and she's with our babies right now at the preschool level. So I'm gonna shut up and just see Felicia. How you doing? What's going on?
Wow, I'm doing really well. Getting, like you said, getting ready for the school year. It's a lot different than the other school years. Very anxious. We don't know exactly what the school year is going to entail. So very nerve-wracking. but I'm excited to get it started. We'll be remotely teaching in the classroom though. So the students will be at their home and all the teachers will be in the classroom. So I'm really just trying to get mentally prepared for my school year.
Yeah, and so in that, I mean, I like the idea of teachers, and those of you, who may not be in the in the business, as I call it, of education, remotely, meaning that students are learning at home. That's the whole distance learning thing. And Felicia, you're saying that y'all going to be in the school, so you'll be able to teach from your classroom.
Yeah, so I'll drive to work every day, go to my classroom and teach from my classroom, but I won't have any kids in my classroom. All my kids will be at their home.
Okay. Okay. That's what's up. That's what's up. So are you anxious? Are you anxious about that? Are you nervous about being able to still connect with students and everything?
I'm extremely nervous. So it went really well during the school year, just because I feel like I knew my students, and I also did summer camp virtually.
Okay.
And there were students I was familiar with because there were students that were already in the school. I'm a little nervous this year because I'm getting new students, so I don't know how it's going to be, and they're so young. This is some of their first times ever coming into school ever.
Yeah.
So first experience coming into school, and it's on the class, it's on the computer, is a little bit different than how we expect it to be. So I'm a little anxious and nervous for that, but I think it's going to go well.
That, you brought up a good point. And one of the advantages, and I hate to even say advantages, because last year when we first went distant learning, when COVID-19 hit us, there was nothing good about that. But the one, if you had to say there was a silver lining, it would probably be that by that time, teachers had already developed relationships with young people, with your students. So when you had to go remote, it was a little easier because at least you had relationships established already. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I do agree with that, because it's hard to establish a relationship with a child that you don't know through a computer screen. It's a lot different when you're in person and you can interact with them and feel, a connection, but it's so much harder to build that connection through a screen.
So you got the babies. So preschool, you got what? 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, right?
So you can get both. This year I have 4-year-olds, but typically you would get a 3-year-old classroom and you would keep them for 2 years.
Tell me, what is that? Listen, the lower you go, I'm gonna just put this out there. And I was a high school English teacher, middle school. I never got down to elementary. True story. This is a true story. My first substitute position, Miss Coleman, shout out to Miss Coleman, Miss B. Coleman, who you talking about legacy and pioneers in Long Branch, one of the pioneers in Long Branch. So she was the sub caller. So she called you, and I was still in college, but I wanted to substitute to get some, experience. So she called me and she was like, all right, you're going to go to Morris Avenue School tomorrow, right? So at this time, I'm like maybe 19, 20 years old. I'm young. Man, I went to that elementary school, Felicia. When I tell you those kids kicked my butt that day, I never worked hard like that day. I remember that night, Miss Coleman called me back. I said, Miss Coleman, put me in the middle school or put me in a high school. I said, don't put me with those babies. I said, because they gave me a run for my money. What is it like, day in and day out being a preschool teacher?
It's amazing. They're so much fun, but they keep you on your toes at all times. It's 15 little human beings in one classroom that you have to pay attention to at all times, because they're just learning the world. They're literally learning the world and trying to figure things out for themselves. So they're always putting things in their mouths, getting upset, and things are big for them, where for us it's not as big. So for them it's so big, and that you teach them that feelings are okay. But I love it. It's absolutely amazing. And I just like the fact that they're so young and you can kind of mold them to be the students you see them being at that age. But yeah, it's absolutely fabulous. You have to have a lot of patience, though. A lot of patience.
I was going to say a lot of patience. And that was the thing that pushed me to tell Miss Coleman, don't ever put me back in, because at that time, I was like 19, 20 years old, and I was like, man, I'm not beat for these kids at this level. I can't be running around with them like that. But real talk, at the same point, at the same time, that level and at that age, you made a good point. There's a lot of, and I don't know if using the word molding is the right word, but there's a lot of like building going on. I'll put it that way. And I'm sure like affirming and making these kids understand that they're brilliant. And that's probably a really big part of what you do. Would you say that?
Yes, getting them to understand that they're good students early on is amazing. Like when they see that they can read books, using pictures or tell stories by storytelling, not writing, they see themselves as students, and it's at that early age where so like you said, they're building, not really molding them, but you're getting them to understand what kind of student they are capable of being. So it's nice that we got them at that young age now, whereas, it's not kindergarten, that's the first start now.
And you're taking them literally right from their parents and like from babies to continuing to work, and how is it like a full day? Like is it 6 hours?
It's a full day from 8:30 to 3:20.
Listen, shout out to early childhood educators. I know in my town, unfortunately, we didn't have preschool when my kids were young enough. And all of the research tells us that preschool, when you start talking about achievement gaps and things of that nature that are developed, when students get to be in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, they start in preschool. Like if you can have a strong preschool situation, which, a shout out to Long Branch, because I feel like Long Branch has been a pioneer in terms of preschool education for years back when it wasn't really a thing. So, I think that gives young people a step up in a lot of ways. So, we salute you, preschool teachers. It's not for me, but I definitely, salute y'all. And you're at, what school?
I'm at Leonard Conroe School in Long Branch. Yeah.
Leonard Conroe. So shout out to all my Leonard Conroe folks. That's where I went, and did you go? You were Conroe?
I did.
That's right. So on that note, let's kind of take a step back. You as a teacher is great, but a lot of what we do at Purpose and Practice is we like to get some backstories in terms of like the kind of work you had to put in and how you reached the point that you're at right now. You have so much more to do, but let's go back to Felicia as a child, Felicia coming up. What was Felicia Clark like coming up?
I was a tough cookie. I've come a long way. So I am a family of 7. I have my mom, Roxanne, my dad, Stanley, and I have 4 brothers. I'm the only girl.
Yes.
So my oldest brother is Maurice. Then there's Donnell. There's Devon, who also works at Long Branch and coaches. There's me, and then there's Dwight. So growing up with boys. I've always been really family oriented and Long Branch pride, that Green Wave pride, born and raised in Long Branch. I've always been involved in the community, doing sports. My family's been involved, coaching, just trying to stay connected to the little kids. And I learned that at a young age. So my mom and my dad always gave back, always participated in community events. So I learned at a young age it's important to stay connected to the Long Branch community. So that's really where it all starts.
I agree. Now let me ask you, did you come up in Grand Court at all?
So right across from Grand Court.
Okay. So, all right. Because the reason I asked that is because, there's a lot of educators who came from that area. Now when I was coming up, you talked about your mom and your dad, like at that time, they lived in Grand Court from what I remember, and I could be wrong, but I remember that for some reason. So they were like, when I tell you playing basketball, like they would take us out, play basketball. And it's funny because my early years, I remember playing more with Roxanne, right? We would be behind the center and it was two sides of the center. We would play like the younger heads would play on one end and then like the older heads would play at the other. So like your dad standing and will be playing, at the other end with the older heads. But Roxanne, people like Roxanne, Raysky, they used to they used to like teach us the game. Like when like what you said about them being teachers and things like that, that was it. And then when we got older, we got to play with Stan. Now that was a different story. Stan was about owning us, not teaching us the game, right? He was teaching us the game through schooling us and owning us, right, on the court. But it was like it prepared us so that when we got to high school to play ball, it was like, yo, we from where we came from, it was nothing. Do you have that feeling like growing up?
It's like a fearlessness, like you get, and you can do anything because you played with the best of the best, the older crew.
Yes.
Like I always played with the boys, so when I got on the court with females, I wasn't afraid. I literally just grew up thinking, breathing basketball because I played with my brothers. My dad showed no mercy, like you said.
Yes.
So,
yes.
It's like a fearlessness that they instilled in us.
Yes. And it definitely helped having those older brothers, and coming up. Because you're the baby, right? Are you the baby?
Dwight's the baby. Everyone always thinks I'm the baby. I'm not.
Right.
Dwight's the baby.
That's right. I forgot about the white. That's right. I forgot about the white. So here's what I want to do. You became a teacher, but at what point did you realize, you know what? Education is what I want to do. Teaching is what I want to do.
Okay. So funny thing is, all my life, I wanted to be an architect. Architectural engineering was what I was going to be doing. Okay. I actually still have that in me. Like I want to build my own school one day. So, but it wasn't until I went to go visit my brother Donnell at TCNJ. And I met some of his friends that were in education, and they always talked about the education program. Like I always enjoyed watching kids and things like that. So it wasn't far from what I liked. But when I went to TCNJ to visit him while he was in school was the moment I knew that I was going to go to TCNJ. And at that point, I really wasn't sure if it was going to be education, but that was the school I wanted to go to. I had my heart set on that school. I liked that it was small. The campus was amazing. The people were amazing. So I knew I wanted to go there. So I started looking into programs and I'm like, I like being around kids. Let me try education. Thinking like, if I don't like it, I can change it. They at the time did not have an architectural engineering program. They only had mechanical engineering. And I was going to do that. So I went to TCNJ, got into education, and it was my sophomore year that I realized that I actually like what I'm doing.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
My year in college, I was like, I actually love this. I like what I'm doing. This is it.
So I think that's another one of those things in terms of one of the benefits of having older siblings is you get to kind of live through their experiences.
Yes.
And going down to be on a college campus, like you got like a first look at that. Like, whereas, I remember coming up, we had some heads too. Like there were some older heads that I remember going to Howard and being like, oh, I would love to be there. You know what I mean? Like, and hearing stories about different universities and everything. So I think that those educational influences are really important. You ended up though in New Jersey, one of the better teacher schools. Like college in New Jersey is like known, nationally for a really good teachers program. What was it like being a student there?
It was fabulous. I loved going there for grad school. I just knew that I was getting the best education. So for what I wanted to do, I knew that this was and I think my sophomore year is when I realized that when I started taking those educational courses, because, your freshman year, you're just taking all your basic courses. So my sophomore year, I started taking my education courses and I was like, oh, this is it. These are some good professors. They know what they're talking about. They're showing me things. And I immediately went into the classroom starting my freshman year, my second semester of my freshman year was the first time I went into the classroom. And that in itself was amazing because I was
Mhm.
talking to, other friends that were also in education in different schools that hadn't been introduced to the classroom yet. So I knew I was doing something great. Like I knew I was at a great school.
Wow. Listen, I was just smiling because to hear you talk and to think about remembering you back as a freshman.
Yes.
Listen, y'all gave me a run for my money. And real talk, y'all gave me a run for my money. But I think, I think about though, Fee, I think about teachers who had influences on you. Like I know that you wanted to go the engineering route, but I remember like really like for example, I remember someone like Grim, like you were always in that room, right? So let's talk a little bit about some of those teachers that even though you weren't thinking education while you were in high school, but when you think back, you're like, wow, like that was a major influence in me coming up.
So Mr. Morrison, he's going to be on your show this week.
Yes.
He is amazing. I had him 3 times. I took his class. He's so
Mhm.
good. I took him 3 years in a row in high school. He always did the race class and gender classes,
Yes.
and he also went to TCNJ.
Yes.
And I just remember being in class and it feeling like a college class. Like, so we didn't have to
Mhm.
sit and listen to him lecture. We literally conversed. Like, we
Yes.
sat there, had conversations, pulled up different things on the computer, things that are controversial in the world, and we discussed them. And he let us have our opinions. So he really stands out to me when I think of education because that's the type of educator you aspire to be.
Yes.
That person that's not dictating the classroom, not trying to
Mhm.
control the students, but letting them figure out, the things that are going on in the world. Yeah,
I Go
someone who
ahead.
made me really see that. Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. And shout out to Mr. Morrison, and I can't wait till Friday night
Can't either.
to,
I beat you to the
yes,
too.
to talk with him. Because just like what you said, at the time when I met him, I was a principal, and I was fortunate enough to even be on like the committee or the hiring committee to bring him in. And I remember, just walking in, like, because we were Leadership Academy, so we were on the first floor. He was on the first floor, and I remember like just kind of going into his class whenever I wanted to kind of feel like some good discussion, some students leading things. I would stop into his
Mhm.
class and hear all of that, which is really, especially now with everything going on in our world now, those things are so important to have those kind of
It's so important.
conversations,
I hope they're
you
still
know?
doing that in high school, giving students the chance to have those open discussions. And just as much as he did that, you have those teachers that weren't your teachers, but they were your teachers because they taught you those
Yes,
other lessons. That's grim. So you mentioned
yes.
and that's literally her. She was not personally my teacher, but she was my teacher because she taught me everything I needed to know. She
Mhm.
helped me with my college essays, like just
Wow.
been there. And she's still there. We still go on our lunch dates.
She's famous for those lunch dates.
Yes. So, I was blessed. I was fortunate enough to have people that saw the potential in me that I didn't see in myself because, I was a little hot headed when I was in high school.
Mhm.
Um, but I had people who knew I was destined for greatness. So that helped a lot.
That what you just said, and a huge shout out to Grim, who when you go on a lunch, your next lunch with her, just make sure she knows that I'm trying to get her on the show, because she needs to get on here as well, for real. But one of the things that you mentioned that makes me reflect on you coming up, because you said I was I can be loud, I can be a little off the hook or whatever, and people seen something in me, or she always schooled me. One of the big things though, Felicia, is that part of the way that we were, even me coming up in high school, it's age appropriate. It's kind of like the way that, our bodies are going through so many changes, mentally we're going through so many changes. And I think, and your education probably taught you that there are some behaviors that are appropriate because it's part of growing.
Mm-hmm.
So and I think sometimes as educators we can get down on young people because they're acting a certain kind of way, but when we think back we got to say, wow, but you know what, that's part of coming up. That's part of maturing, that's part of growing. And folks like you mentioned, Grimm, and then folks like Mr. Morrison, and then obviously having a strong foundation at home helps you to grow and mature the way that you need to. So you leave Long Branch High School, you graduate, you go down to Trenton, the College of New Jersey, or Ewing. I don't know, maybe in Ewing actually. So you go down, you go to Ewing. And were there ever times when you felt like giving up or when things got hard?
My freshman year was really hard. That transition from high school to college was extremely hard, and Grimm knows this. I loved the school that I went to, and in some ways I was prepared, but then other ways I wasn't. I was an athlete. My family's known, so sometimes I got away with I got away with more than I should have gotten away with. And in college, it's none of that. It's like you're responsible for your own actions. You're responsible for getting up on your own, making it to class, handing in your assignments, and you can't do it later. You do it now. And that was the biggest lesson I learned. So that transition from high school to college was a tough one. But once I got over my freshman year, I think I was pretty okay, because once I learned what I needed to do to get through it, I made it out okay.
And that adjustment period, I like to refer to it as an adjustment period, because high school, I don't think high school can ever really prepare us for college, because it's not college, it's not a university. But what you said about being accountable and people kind of letting you slide on certain things, because you're an athlete, because people know who your peoples are. That is important, that part, because it can be setting you up for failure. It can be setting you up for failure. So in bouncing, you talked about, I guess you had a support system that helped you through that year. You talked about teachers. Anyone else that kind of helped you through, or anything else? Maybe it was something, maybe you worked out, maybe you did some things. What else helped you through that time?
My brother, Donnell, he was so he was a senior, and I was a freshman. So he kind of like pulled me in. We would have study nights, lots of staying up, pushing through it. So he helped. Grimm helped a lot. And then, lots of prayer, honestly. Praying to God every night that I make it through, because it was a rough year.
Yeah.
I was always a really good student. Even when I gave my teachers a hard time, I always was a student. So when I got to college, the workload was way more intense, and it wasn't a breeze for me. So high school, elementary school, middle school, those were all breezy. I always considered myself to be smart, and it's easy. It was easy. But when I got to college, it wasn't easy. I had to put in work, and I failed my first class.
In college?
My first semester at TCNJ.
Wow.
My first class ever in my entire life.
What did you fail? What was it?
Psychology 101.
Wow. Wow. So many of my guests, we have that thought of failing that class. We talked last week, I was talking to Jacinia, and she was talking about failing a class. I know I failed a class like my freshman year. I failed 2, through that year, and almost got kicked off of campus. How was that like, though? What was your bounce back like? Did you blame the teacher, or did you take accountability for that?
I blamed myself. It was an 8:00 class, and I slept all the time in that class. because it was so
Mhm.
early. Not one of my proudest moments, but I'm not afraid to admit when I, mess up or fail or
True.
but yeah, I slept pretty much like every day. I just could not get up. I was partying a little too much
Yep.
and just I couldn't get up and I failed the class. So I had to take accountability for it. I took it over and I passed it with an A. Um, but that was one of my moments that I was like, "Oh, I need to get my stuff together because this is
Yeah.
me and I don't fail."
Get your life together. Get your life together.
Get your life,
And
get up, try again.
so you went from now, how many years did you teach? Did you start right off as a teacher or did you do anything like did you sub? What was that like?
So right after I graduated, I went to Long Branch and I got a substitute position for maternity
Okay,
leave. And then halfway through the year, so I started in September as a substitute, and then I got hired as a teacher in January,
perfect.
officially
Okay.
February.
Okay. So, because I think that substitute part, I'm always about paying dues. I think like you should pay your dues. And I think subbing is important. It's all good to come right out of college and land a teaching job. But I think those folks who go through, whether it's substituting or being a paraprofessional for a little bit, I think that you learn a lot in those
Yeah.
experiences. So I think that those experiences, even though you want to be a teacher, you want to be the teacher right away, but I think you learn a lot, in those experiences. So how long did you teach, Felicia, before you decided to go off and get your master's?
2 years. So I had a 2-year break, longer than what I wanted. I saw myself going back sooner. Um, but then I found myself not really being ready. So when I was ready, I went, I applied, and I knew I was ready to start and mentally prepared to do it.
Mhm.
So 2 years it took me after teaching.
So you taught for 2 years and then you applied for grad school, started grad school 2 years later.
Yep.
And what did you do for your master's?
So I got my master's in literacy development with a reading specialist
Mm.
certification. So my certification just went through. I'm officially certified reading
Wow. That is like, so you're a reading specialist right now.
specialist.
Wow. That that's so powerful. That I hate to say I'm proud, but I am proud, but I'm also encouraged because the I believe in that whole leaders of the new school. Like, you all are the leaders of the new school. In the things and the energy that people like me brought to the game 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Now you're bringing that kind of energy, and it's so, so needed. And to be like, yo, teaching, how, why reading? Let me just ask that before I get it on my box. Like, why reading?
I've always had a love for reading in my English classes. My English professors were amazing. So I always had this thing for reading. Like even when I was in elementary school and middle school, I remember for Christmas asking my parents for books, and they're like, "You want books?" So I always enjoyed reading. But then when I got hired at Long Branch, so actually started as a third grade English language arts teacher at Gregory
Oh,
School.
okay.
So that's where I started.
Shout out to Gregory. Shout out to Gregory.
I subbed at Lena as a kindergarten teacher. And then when they hired me full time in February, I went over to Gregory School in third grade English language arts and writing. And I had a lot of kids that had a hard time with reading. And that was the moment that changed everything for me. Well, at that moment, I knew that I want to go back and I want to teach reading and teach kids
Wow.
who are struggling with reading because, when you get that grade point, it gets, if you're not, by third grade, if you're not reading proficiently, the rest of your learning experience is going to be really challenging. So my goal is to get kids before they get to that third grade mark, learning how to read and help them get through that struggle of reading.
I'm like, listen, I wish my kids had you. I for real, because that reading piece that you're touching on, that is the magic. Like when you see, and you probably can explain this, the feeling of taking a student who cannot read at that age to when it clicks. What is that like? Like, what is that? What does it feel like?
So, I used to always get like, am I pushing my preschoolers too much? And this is one reason why I really, really just love my building principal. Mrs. Brown is my building principal.
Shout out to Miss
She
Brown.
has this idea that if you can prove it, if you can show me, then you can keep doing it. So,
Mm,
in the beginning of the year, she's like, are your expectations too high? She's not afraid to check what you're doing. She'll come into my classroom and tell me, I think this might be too challenging.
mhm,
But then it's rewarding when she comes in for my second and third observation.
mm,
And she's like, I
mm.
see what you did there.
Wow.
So I have 3 and 4 year olds, and a lot of people think it's too early to introduce them to reading. And my first class I had for 3 and 4, I had them for 2 years. I had half of my class reading already.
Wow.
So if you can already get them going at that age, when they get to kindergarten, they learn their sight words. The books that they're learning and reading are all sight words. You teach them those and they're reading already. So yeah, it's off of memory, but they are confident because they are reading. They can read those words. So then half of reading, half of that battle is confidence. A lot of kids don't have that confidence that they
Mm,
can do it. So if you get them at that young age doing it for fun, when it becomes an actual task and a requirement, in preschool, it's not required that they read, but in kindergarten, it is. So by the
yes.
time they get to kindergarten, when it is required, they have that confidence. So it's easy for them. So the key is getting them to think that they can do it early on so that when they
Wow.
get to have to do it, they can. Um, so that's the big piece.
Wow. Wow. Listen, I'm because as a former English teacher, I understand the power. And it's funny because the reason why I went into teaching English when I was in college, it was the greatest struggle for me. That subject area like was the greatest struggle for me. So I met a professor during my college years who really like opened up the world in terms of literacy, and it changed my life. It literally changed my life. So when you say like what you're saying, because that happened to me, think about it, at 18. You're talking about having babies at 3 years old and 4 years old and beginning to open up that world, of being able, because reading to me is like, it's like solving the greatest puzzle,
A lot of
you
people and
know?
a lot of students think it's a task that they have to do. And it's really honestly getting them to understand that it's really not a task. It's something that's fun and you can enjoy it and you can do it for pleasure. A lot of um, people don't understand that I can read this for pleasure. I don't have to do it and it's a task or
Mhm.
something to do. So when
Wow.
you get them doing it so young, they understand that, oh, I like to do this. It's fun. When you make it a game and they're preschoolers and you're making them read words and they realize that they can read that word, they get so excited they're rolling. So
Yes. Yes. It's because it's unlocking the world.
yeah.
Literacy, like when you learn to read, you are unlocking the world, and so many other subjects
Yes, you
come
do.
easier.
Yes, that is the key. People think like I'm good at math, but like, and realistically, to be good at math, you also have to be good at reading. Like,
Mhm.
not every problem is just going to be numbers. There's going to be words in there, and you have to
Yes.
break apart those words to figure out what they're asking you to do. And that's where that reading comprehension and that reading really comes in. So you're unlocking every subject, and every subject you're going to be using reading and writing.
Yes.
So if you
Yes.
are good at it, then the chances of you having trouble in other subjects are lower.
So here's what I want to do. We got parents sometimes who listen and watch, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes people who haven't had the training of educators, they may struggle with like, all right, what do I do? Especially now, Felicia, like, because parents are going to be home with their children, like, and you're going to be doing your remote thing. But at the same time, there's this challenge because I'm an educator. And when I tell you I struggle with my kids, like I didn't want to, like, I was like, listen, I can't teach y'all. Like my patience for them was like, I can't, it was crazy.
People have more patience with other people's kids than they do their own.
Yes.
So the key is to have patience with your child.
Yes.
It is as stressful for them as it is for you. Give them breaks. Let them get up. That's a long time to be sitting at a computer screen. Because I know for me, when I'm in professional development, now that they've been in the computer, I get a little bit more antsy than I would if they were in person. Like looking at a computer screen and not having that face-to-face interaction, you got to be patient with your kids. Definitely give them breaks.
I like that.
Don't be so hard on them. They're little. And, just try to understand from their perspective because they're struggling just as much as you're struggling to help them.
Yes. And they can't communicate it. It's hard for them to
explain that I'm having trouble with this.
One of the things that, I remember coming up, and growing up, and my mom, I distinctly remember my grandmother pretty much like held it down. So we would come home from school, we would have our homework, and we probably wouldn't do it the way that we should do it because my grandmother was there. And then my mom would come from work that night and like she would wake us up out of our sleep, you know what I'm saying? Like to do our homework.
Standing right there with my parents, okay? I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yo, like that, we would think we were getting away with it, but it'd be 10:30, 11 o'clock, So, but if you had to give some advice for parents in terms of like schedules, setting up schedules, routines.
Making the routine consistent. That's so important. So in preschool, one of the reasons why we're so successful is that you have the same routine every day. Just to get them accustomed to feeling like they're at school. So being that they're not at school, you still want to keep them on a school routine. Make sure that they get up, have breakfast, make sure that they do some type of reading, some type of playing, some type of nap time if they're little ones, and some type of break if they're older. Keep them on a set schedule that they have to follow every day, Monday through Friday. And just making sure you're strict on that schedule, not letting them budge off of it, because once they realize that they can kind of, stray away from their schedule, they'll try to do it often.
So basically, Felicia, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine.
So like right now, real talk, like my son is just playing Fortnite, right? He's been like all summer, he's been playing Fortnite. My daughter's been playing Roblox or whatever, right? So now we're like maybe 2 weeks away from school.
Yes, so I would start getting your kid on that sleep schedule. That's important. Like my nieces are already getting on their sleep schedule. They know their bedtime during the school year is 8:30. That should start about now because they're 2 weeks away, just so their body can get used to getting up and not being so exhausted the first week of school. Because if you don't start them right away, the first couple of weeks of school are going to be hard. So I'm getting them on their sleep schedule, having them have dinner earlier, bed earlier, and then waking up earlier, even though they don't have anywhere to go.
So parents, and this is me too, because right now, listen, my son is trying to play Fortnite until 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. So parents, and me included, Felicia just told us, get them on a sleep schedule now.
Yeah.
Like give them time to get out of that summer, that summer vibe. So they get on a sleep schedule now. Because, a lot of times, like, parents, we're out here struggling with the day-to-day. And like you talked about earlier about, before we even got on the air about, your mom always hustling and working hard and stuff like that. Like, that's how we're built. Like parents, like we're going to hold it down. And then it's like when we come home from holding it down and earning a living to take care of the house, it's like it's hard
It is.
sometimes, and you could be the best parent,
Yes.
you know.
So that's another
It
thing.
doesn't.
Parents, don't be hard on yourself because it is hard. I know because I I have your kids at one time in a classroom full of kids, and it is hard. It is hard, and
Mhm.
just making sure that you stay connected with your teacher. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your teacher. It's their job to help you during this time. And if you have a teacher that's not as willing to help, um, Dr. Rawls has my Facebook. I help with kids at all
That's right.
times, so you can always reach out to me. But really, you should never feel bad or um, be hard on yourself about having questions because you're going to, because this is not what you went to school for. This is not what you thought you'd be doing. So it's definitely a challenge. So make sure you're reaching out to your teacher constantly so that you're staying and connect with them.
I think that's really good advice, Felicia, and hopefully parents listen and heed that. Um, because even as an educator, like I said, like I struggle, in terms of making sure that I'm providing the greatest environment, me and my wife, and situation for my kids, So it's not easy, and sometimes you start getting down on yourself, as a parent, and you're like, man, I'm not doing my part, or, they're going to fail because of me. And then you start taking that frustration out on the child, you
I see
know?
that a lot. I
And
do. I see that a lot where parents are reaching out to me and they're so stressed out that they're not doing enough or they're not doing it right. The more you stay connected with your teacher, you'll find things that your child's teacher does in the classroom that you may have not thought of that
mm,
will work for your child just because they're so
mm,
used to seeing it so much. So it's
yes.
so important to stay in contact with your child's teacher because I know there's like little signals and things that I do in the classroom that the parent wouldn't know that I do.
Yeah.
So those kind
Yeah.
of things are little things that just work. They know what they mean, they know what they're supposed to do, and they work. So if you stay in communication and you can let your child's teacher know exactly what they're struggling with, then I'm pretty sure your teacher will probably have a response to what
Mhm.
you can do for your child for that specific thing that they're struggling with, whether it be sitting down or an actual assignment or just wanting to do work online.
That is great advice, that you just gave. You're dropping some real jewels, Felicia. Like, you definitely sounded like, a reading specialist. But this is why, it's funny because this is the reason why I wanted to do educator shows, because I feel like the pressure is real right
Yeah.
now. It's like game 7. Like everybody is like on 100, like, so I'm like, let's get some educators on to start talking about some best practices to help young people, at home, and to help their own children, and to help their own mind, so that they don't start feeling like a failure. Because you talked about confidence, and I think that is so. You talked about, when you were talking about reading earlier, you talked about reading confidence. And I just think that confidence is so important, and I think parents need to feel confident too.
Yes.
Like we need to feel confident. And I think that what you provided in terms of the structure, in terms of, being in contact with parents, or teachers rather, and making sure you're staying in tune with teachers. And then sometimes just having
Yeah.
conversations, like with your
I know
child.
I do that a lot as the teacher. I reach out to my parents and ask them, do they need anything? How are you doing? How's it going? Because this is stressful. I know it is. I have my
Hmm.
nieces and I work with them from home, and it's so much different when you're working with your own kid. I
Yes.
tend to have the pressure from your day, and sometimes you don't mean to, but you'll take out your pressures from your day out on your kid, and it's just a little bit frustrating when you're had a long day of work and then you have to come help your child with homework. And so, you know, lighten the load, reach out. Teachers and parents reach out to each other because it helps. It does. Ask. Like, I know for me, and I think this is me saying to all teachers, really ask your parents how they're doing because it's not easy for them right now.
Wow.
Really difficult time. And that you build that relationship with your parents and they'll forever be grateful and they'll forever help you whenever you need something, because as a teacher you need help sometimes getting advice from the parent. How would they handle the situation
Mhm.
with their child? So if you be that for them, they'll be the same for you. So
Listen, that's a great place to go next. Like that relationship between a parent and a teacher is so, and you just explained it as a two-way street.
yes.
Like you just explained it like it works, that works both
Mhm.
ways. So now I want you to talk to, you've been talking to parents. I want you to talk to educators, right? What are some things that educators can do to make parents, especially those parents who may not be comfortable talking to teachers and, school personnel, what is some advice you can give parents in terms of getting better at communicating with the teachers that their children have?
So most parents don't stay in communication if they're not comfortable. So people assume that they're, too busy or they don't like education, but that's not that's not the case. I know because my mom was that parent. My mom didn't go reach out to the teacher.
Mhm.
She only came when she needed to come. If someone was
Mhm.
getting in trouble and she had to come, that was a good sign.
Yep. Yep.
But there's parents that just aren't like that. So to make them feel comfortable, you have to do the reaching out. You have to make sure that you have to let them know that you care about their child. When you let a parent know that their child is your priority, then they're more likely to open up to you. They feel less weird coming to you about things that are happening in their home. They don't want to feel like their teacher's being nosy, trying to be in their business or anything like that. They want to know that it's just the best interest of the child.
Wow.
So just sometimes you don't always have to be so professional. Like that
Talk
sounds
about that. No, talk about that. You need to talk about that.
that does it sounds weird. Like you don't always have to be so professional. Like you can talk to them on a personal level. Because parents are going through things too. And that's literally how I get so many parents involved. I always have high number of participation. I literally do, but I do everything I can to reach out to parents. What some parents can't come to conferences. I'll call you on the phone. We can have a phone
Mhm.
conference. You don't
Mhm.
have to come in. Like
Mm.
going out your way to really get those parents that can't come in. Some parents don't have cars. Like not everyone is as fortunate. So you have to look at every situation as a different situation. You can't group everyone together. Um, Making sure you have different platforms. Not every parent has social media. So you can't go and make a website and expect them to see it because they don't have it. So, making sure that for some parents, you're doing those phone calls that are annoying because, yes, it's 2020 and everyone has social media. No, everyone doesn't. So, make those phone calls, you know, give them different ways to reach out to you email, phone, pop by the school if you need to. Like, just giving them different opportunities to fill in their element. See what works best for them. If you know what works best for them, then they'll be more likely to open up to you. Show them that you care about their child. They're going to open up to you.
I like
Every
that.
parent wants to know that their child is being taken care of when they're not in their hands. And
Yes.
especially at the little kids, they're your babies. Like this is
Mhm.
they don't go
Mhm.
anywhere. They're with you all the time. You're
Yes.
sending them to preschool and you want them to be safe. You want them to be happy.
Yes.
The
That
kid is coming home happy every day and telling you how much they like school and how much they love their teacher and their friends. Their parent is also going to be happy, and their parent is not going to be hesitant about reaching out to you because they know that you're someone that's approachable or you can talk to them.
Felicia, you've blown me away. Like I've been in the game for a minute, and for you to be at the level you're at right now in your career, so young in your career, and the wisdom that you're coming with, I think back to, shoot, I wasn't talking like you when I was you. Like I wasn't like so, but that lets me know the future is so bright. Our future is so light. Those young people in Long Branch, those babies in Long Branch are so fortunate to have you. I'm just really like real talk. And what you just said about, don't be so concerned, and we all have to be professional because we're all professionals. I get that. But there has to be a level of relatability. Like if you're not having any kind of level of relatability with your parents, and if parents don't think you're real and that you care, like what you said, that you care for their children and you love their children, then none of it is going to work. None of it is going to work. So I think that for teachers out there, for educators out there, um, that's one thing I would say. The other thing that you dropped on that I think is really important is, let's not make assumptions. So if a parent doesn't show up to back to school night, that doesn't mean or equal that the parent doesn't care about education.
I hear that
you
often.
know?
It really bothers me because I was one of those kids. Like my mom
Mhm.
and dad went to every sports event I ever had,
Mhm.
but they did not come to conferences realistically.
Yes.
One, they knew that we went to school to do what we were supposed to do.
True.
So they knew that when our report cards came in, they were going to be good. Because if there weren't, there were going to be consequences. Those sports that we love playing, we weren't
Mhm.
playing them, and
One thing
our
away.
grades weren't good. So they didn't feel the need to go to every conference because they already knew that if my child is not doing what they're supposed to do, I've already given every teacher, every person in the community the green light to give me a call or do what they needed to do. So there are some parents that just, are out there working, providing for their family that just really can't make it to those conferences or just know they have expectations for their child that their child is going to meet because
Yes.
it's already been established. So
Yes.
you can't make those assumptions. And I tell people that all the time because if only you knew what
Mhm.
I came from that. So when
Mhm.
I hear people making those assumptions, it's like, no, I'm sitting right in front of you and I'm a living proof. I'm living proof. I'm sitting right in front
Same.
of you. Like,
Same here.
yeah, like
Same
living
here.
proof that you can come
Yep.
from small and go big. You can make it to anything you want to be. You can do whatever you want to do. And,
Yes.
people don't always see that, they see Long Branch and they don't see the potential. You have some people that tell you, like, you're not going to make it. And
Mhm.
if you're telling kids that, you shouldn't be in the profession.
Mhm. I agree. And that's why us having folks like you, you get it, Felicia. And you like, I already knew what time it was with you, but after our conversation, I'm already like, all right, we need a part two with Felicia.
I know.
Like,
I still,
like
I'm like, it's already 9 o'clock and I have
listen,
to.
we could go forever. We definitely, but listen, here's what I'm gonna say to educators out there, right? Felicia was, I go back to ninth grade with Felicia. And at ninth grade, the Felicia that's here right now, that wasn't the Felicia at ninth grade. So, and I say that because the Dr. Rawls that's here right now, I posted a picture a little earlier and people were like, I know Mariah was like, I can't believe that's not you. And it's like, there's transformations that we go through. And the job and the duty of a teacher, the role of a teacher is to see the
That's
best
part of
part
their
in whatever child we are dealing with and working with, and if we're not doing that, we're not doing our jobs. You know what I'm saying? Like we're and here's another thing I'm gonna say. Like when you do that and prove that to parents, parents are gonna be like, Felicia, I know they probably say to you, Miss Clark, Felicia, do whatever you gotta do. Because they trust
right, 'cause they
that you
know and
coming
they
with
trust the person.
love.
Mhm. They do.
Yes. Yes.
So
I know that. I see people in the chat right now that I'm like, those are the kind of relationships that we have, and they trusted me with their children. So, and that's a great responsibility to have that trust. You know, it's not easy to have that trust. So, a question, Felicia, that I like to ask all of the guests is, if you had to give some advice to your high school self, right? Like you had to go back and you had to give some advice to your high school self, what would that advice
To
be?
stay focused. In high school, I was like so caught up in stuff that didn't matter, you know, drama and I would tell myself to stay focused because that's how I made it out the way I did. When I got to college, I really had to shift my way of thinking and really focus on my goals and what I wanted to do. So if I would have did that a little earlier, I think my transition from high school to college wouldn't be so harsh. So that would be my advice to myself: stay focused.
Thank you. That's definitely a jewel. I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to say this: we don't know what this school year is going to bring, right? And one thing that I'm asking some of my educator friends and some of my educator family, forget about friends, family, is that if we really get into a situation where we really need to be providing different services, whether to parents and helping parents out, like some of the jewels that you gave, helping students out, if you would be willing, to kind of on shows like this, to come on and give some like, hey, try this especially for reading, try this, try that. These are some things that'll work at home because we may get into like December, January, and we're still remote. So parents may be reaching like, what am I going to do with my children? Are you willing to come back onto the show and possibly talk about some more of these things?
Yep, no doubt.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Felicia, you are definitely family to the Purpose and Practice podcast. Like you family now.
So I know I want to drop this in here before you close.
Go ahead, drop it. What you got?
So I know you do a lot of reading. I have a book for you.
Yeah. Okay.
So Troublemakers, Lessons in Freedom from Young Children at School, written by Carla Shalaby. Oh, hold on, sorry. I should put this on Do Not Listen. So it's Troublemakers, Lessons in Freedom from Young Children at School, written by Carla Shalaby.
Troublemakers, Lessons for Young?
Lessons in Freedom from Young Children at School.
Just putting it in the chat, so I'll have it.
And it's by Carla Shalaby. And it's a good read for parents and educators. It goes to, talking, we briefly touched on this, the assumptions that you make about kids and where they come from. It touches on all of that. It's a really great book to read. So
listen, let me get off because Lombrand's gonna mess around and get you stolen. And I'm not trying to steal no folks from different districts, but they're gonna mess around and get you stolen and you're gonna be with me somewhere. Like, listen, I'm on that. I'm gonna grab that book. And it's funny because the Purpose and Practice, we have a book club. So I'm gonna put that on there, and I'm gonna put that on there. Our next book we're reading from Aramith, but you got his book?
No, I'm gonna get it because I saw that reading it. I know I don't have a podcast, but I would like to, I like reading. So.
Yeah, his book is good. So what I'm gonna do is I put that in the chat so it'll be there for us. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna check that out. Troublemakers, and because I'm trying to think. And who did you say it's by? Because I'm trying to think if I know
Carla Shalaby.
Okay, all right. I'll find it. Shout out to Mr. Morrison. Mr. Morrison thought that was funny that I'm gonna try to steal you. And then Tammy is saying I can't have you. So listen, it's all good. It's all good. We all Long Branch fam. But you know what? On the real, it's coming out of Long Branch. Yo, it's some game changers. And you are definitely, Felicia, one of those up and coming game changers that, we're very lucky to have you. And I really appreciate you. I thank you for giving, your time, and please send my love and respect to your family. because even thinking about that's like 6 episodes right there. Like I could go, I could go down a line with all of them. Like Dev was like, oh, this one gonna be fire. And I'm like, Dev, I'm coming for you too. Like, because these are the things, because what I'm trying to create with this kind of podcast, is I'm trying to create something where young people can hear some of these stories and hear some of the motivation and some of the like, yo, it wasn't always easy. And this is where I came from, but this is where I'm at. Like, I think we need to hear more of those stories from folks coming out of our community. So these are the kind of stories I'm trying to bring, to the people. So I thank you for being a part of this,
Thank you for
Felicia. I
having me,
really do.
and I will love
I
you any
really
other
do.
time. So
Listen, you signed up already. You listen, I'll be reaching out. So we're going to sign
okay.
off. Purpose and practice. We were here tonight with Felicia. This is our first night broadcast. And tomorrow we will be back. Please come out, check out tomorrow's episode at 8 o'clock with Mr. Miller, Mr. Anthony Miller, who's doing great things. And we're going to have a conversation with him that I know you're going to love. Felicia, I will be in touch.
Okay.
Have a great opening of the school year.
Thank
If I don't talk to you before that,
you.
have a great opening of the school year. Keep doing your thing. And shout out to everybody who was in the chat tonight. So much love in the chat.
Yeah.
Like crazy love in the chat tonight. Like I'm looking at some names and I'm seeing like Miss Cummings, I'm seeing Miss Karen, I'm seeing like Strong. Starks just came
Our
in.
grandson
Like it's
was
like
one of my first
crazy.
babies. He was in
Who
first
was?
class. Karen's grandson.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
He's
Little
my
Orlando.
first
See?
kid.
Wow. See, we all got history, Bug is in there. I won't call her Bug. Tiffany is in there. Like it's like crazy love in the chat. Miss Glansberg was in there. Crazy love. And I'm listen, I gotta get off of here because I'm starting to feel like I'm back in Long Branch here. I can't do that, but it's all good. I got love for y'all and thank y'all all for coming out. Felicia, again, thank you. Salute to you. Keep doing your thing and we will be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, take care, everybody. Peace and be well.